The situation in Afghanistan is getting worse by the day. The country continues to be rocked by ISIS-affiliated attacks. 2 explosions hit Kabul today in an attack targeting a large military hospital. The Taliban says at least 7 people were killed, but reports indicate the death toll could be much higher. The country is also facing a food crisis. The UN warns the country is among the world's worst humanitarian crises, if not the worst. As many as 10,000 Afghans applying to come to Canada are stranded. My next guest is calling on the Canadian government to step up its game. Allan Rock is a special advisor at the World Refugee and Migration Council. He previously served as Canada's ambassador to the United Nations. Mr. Rock is in Ottawa. Mr. Rock, you've signed a letter to the Prime Minister calling on the government to do more in its efforts to resettle eligible Afghans to Canada. Walk us through what you want to see Canada do.
First of all, to establish the context, Katie, those of us who've been working since mid-August to help vulnerable Afghans escape the Taliban can tell you harrowing stories of individuals who've been hiding in their basement, with the Taliban knocking on the front door, searching house to house, trying to find them, or ISIS. These people are in grave peril, and it's getting worse and worse by the week. It's now been, almost 2.5 months since the Taliban took over, and those people are really in grave danger. So that's the context. And then, from our point of view, there's a real gap between the government's aspiration and the performance. So we very much support the aspiration under the special immigration program, the humanitarian program, to take out those Afghans, either who assisted Canada or who are vulnerable, the journalists, the LGBTQ, the ethnic minorities, religious minorities, and people like women judges, women leaders. So what we're finding on the ground is that there's a lack of clarity as to who's eligible, and there are different points of view. And we've been dealing with senior officials and political staffers who've been terrific, just terrific. But we need political leadership to clarify these terms and point the way forward. Now that we have a government in place, a cabinet sworn in after almost 3 months of caretaker government, we want to see that clarity provided. And we need it urgently because, as I say, the need is now.
So you're looking for clarification on who is eligible to come to Canada. How can the ministers assist in making sure that clarity is there? And how can they add more urgency to make sure this operation really kicks forward and moves faster?
It seems to us that the ministers can help by simply giving direction to senior officials. They have to make clear what it is to have an enduring relationship with Canada, what it is to be a vulnerable Afghan. Now, when these programs were announced, the government made it clear, and we were very happy to know, that they intended to take an expansive, dare I say, a liberal interpretation of these terms, so that an enduring relationship with Canada would mean, broadly interpreted, those who assisted us in some way or were useful to Canada during our presence there. As to vulnerable Afghans, we very much hope that it's not only human rights defenders, but it is those women leaders and the other categories that I mentioned. But we need a minister to lay down the law, to make that clear, to give direction. We also need the minister to be the champion for more resources to be devoted to this effort. The volume is difficult for the officials to manage. We need help. We need resources to be able to process the number of individuals who are at grave risk. The other thing we need is the government of Canada to just, with a stroke of a pen, declare that this is a prima facie refugee situation, as we did in Syria. So the individuals coming out don't have to establish from scratch their eligibility as refugees. Why duplicate the effort? It's hardly necessary. And the last thing we suggest is that Canada should work with allies in putting pressure on the Taliban, using any and all leverage we have to extract from them concessions, that the individuals we want to take out can have safe passage to the airport or to a border, so we can actually get them out of the country.
Now, you sort of alluded to this when you presented some of the context of what's going on the ground right now, but why are you sending this letter now? What is the urgency now?
Oh, Katie, the frustration has been growing over the last many weeks. We've tried and tried to make sense of how these terms are being interpreted, who's in, who's out, what NGOs on the ground in Afghanistan can do the referral work. And, again, I'm not being critical of the officials in the departments. They've been wonderful. They've worked their hearts out, but they too need political direction. So now we're looking to the political masters here and we're saying, please, this has gone on for far too long. Time is so much of the essence. There's a degree of frustration at not knowing which way is up. Please clarify, please define liberally and expansively. Send that direction to your officials. Let's make the relationships with NGOs on the ground in Afghanistan strengthened and broader, with more NGOs involved to help us process these vulnerable individuals. Let's get on the effort with allies to press the Taliban using every leverage we can. So it's the ministers. Only the political leadership can provide what's needed now. Everything looks great on paper, but we need that push to make it a reality in the lives of those individuals we're trying to save.
There are new ministers in the role of immigration, a new minister in the role of foreign affairs. Do you have confidence that these new ministers can tackle this challenge?
Oh, yeah, they're terrific people. I mean, I've admired Sean Fraser since I came to, we all watched him as parliamentary assistant to parliamentary secretary to the Minister of Finance. He's terrific. Melanie Joly is going to be a great Minister of Foreign Affairs. Steep learning curve for both of them, but they're more than capable of it. And I think they've also got the right instincts. It's just a question of getting their attention focused on these urgent issues. And that's why so many NGOs came together so quickly to sign that letter. We want this to be high on the agenda of both ministers, on the short list of priorities over the coming weeks, so that we can get this nailed down and get the job done.
Really quickly, I want to ask you about one last thing. Afghanistan is under Taliban control, and to be generous, resources on the ground are limited, and that is a very generous description. Realistically, how much more can Canada do?
Well, we can follow through in our commitments under these special programs. We have a moral obligation to the people who assisted us. We have a moral obligation to those who are very vulnerable that we can save. Beyond that, I mean, as a member of the international community, we have to have a strategy on Afghanistan. Will there be recognition? On what terms and conditions? We obviously have to provide sustenance to those who are now in a food emergency. We have to provide, as much as we can, pressure to protect those who are vulnerable on a continuing basis, like the religious minorities, LGBTQ. We can't take them all out. So we have to exert pressure on Afghanistan, on the Taliban to behave in a civilized fashion, although that may be a contradiction in terms. So there's a great deal we have to do in relation to Afghanistan. I'm just putting my finger on the most urgent steps, and those are the ones we want to see taken now.
Allan Rock, thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you, Katie.
Hi, I'm Vashi Capellos, host of Power in Politics. See more of our show by subscribing to the CBC News channel or click the link for another video.